suppose Republicans in Congress didn't learn their lesson about Grover Norquist when he was embroiled in the dirty dealings of Jack Abramoff, but they are certainly getting wise now. Perhaps they finally realize that he is not a voting member of the body, because now Republican Senators Graham, Chambliss, Corker, and Congressman Peter King have all said that they no longer feel obligated to the Norquist tax pledge. What has kept Norquist relevant all this time? His war chest. Money coming specifically from the powerful special interest groups that are lobbying to keep taxes low. Joining us from San Francisco is Lee Fong, contributing writer for The Nation magazine, who has been following the money trail that leads directly to Norquist. Hi, Lee. Nice to see you.
Hey, good morning.
So explain to me, I think we have this sense of Norquist as an independent actor, but he's actually embedded in a web, and that's your story. Talk to me a little bit about what this web is.
Yeah, so I took a look at the donors to Grover Norquist's foundation and found some pretty unsurprising results. Over 66%, that's more than 2/3 of his budget, came from just two billionaire-backed nonprofits. So if you peel back the layers, the people giving money and propping up Norquist are folks like Steve Schwartzman, Steve Bechtel, Paul Singer. These are investors and billionaires who have a lot to gain from not cutting taxes. They already pay a shockingly low rate, and they don't want to pay a penny more. So when Norquist says he's going to retaliate against some of the folks who are deviating from the pledge, what he means is that his donor network will go after these folks with attack ads, with money for primary challenges. That's where his real power base comes from.
So, Lee, earlier this week, my colleague Chris Hayes tweeted that, let's be clear, it's not Grover Norquist who is the reason that Republicans are against these tax increases. It's rich people, right? And so Grover just becomes the rich person, or the person who is sort of representative of these rich folks. Do we need to stay focused on where the real pressure is coming from?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When Norquist goes out and says, we need to cut government, cut subsidies, but don't touch any of those tax credits, well, here's what he's really saying. What's the difference between a $1 million oil tax credit and a $1 million oil tax subsidy? Nothing. They're economically equivalent. But in Norquist's world, a tax credit can't be touched. If you do that, you're raising taxes. And he's known for going around Capitol Hill, threatening anyone who tries to cut these billions of dollars in wasteful tax credits to oil companies. So he's basically providing an ideological cover for corporate lobbying, because in addition to these billionaires, the oil and natural gas industry provides significant funding to his foundation. So,
Lee, I want to bring in my guest here, Dan Dicker, on exactly this question. Dan?
Yeah, this has been a very important point that I hope that the president will get to in his second term, a real consolidated energy proposal where he does cut these subsidies to big oil and uses them for alternative energy. It's a direction I think he's been going. I think he's been moving, unfortunately, a little bit in the direction of clean coal. I think that's the wrong direction to go. But this, I have to say, if we're talking on the bigger picture, there's been nothing. If you had to point to one thing, and Laura was talking about this, if you had to point to one thing that talked about the disparity, the wealth disparity that we're looking at, if you had to point to just one thing, it's been this downward slope in the upper bracket marginal tax rates that have caused that. And this president, that's why it's so important for us to hold our ground on this, because this president is not moving things back to the 50s or the 60s. He's moving things back 10 years. That's exactly right. He's moving things back just 10 years to a place where it wasn't, even just turning the boat around a little bit at this point would be great. That's where we get all these crazy figures about 93% of the wealth that was created over the last 4 years went to 2%, to 91% of the people, and the other 9% was left for the other 7% of the people. That's right. And that's because of marginal tax rates. And Boehner doesn't have the votes on a marginal tax rate.
Right, and this is where the huge support for the president is. When we look at the public opinion polling, we see that more than 60% of Americans support raising taxes on incomes over $250,000.
8 of the 10 wealthiest counties in the nation voted for Obama. Rich people are in favor, surprisingly, a lot of them, in raising taxes. They know it's unfair.
So Ari, how do we then sort of put together what Lee's talking about here, the incentive structure that is crafted by Norquist with an incentive structure that's crafted by that 60%?
Well, Lee made such an important point that bears repeating, which is Grover is this flashy mascot that actually gets in the way of the transactional politics at play.
Right.
So when you drive that wedge, for example, Bill Kristol is not a billionaire. He has often aligned himself with billionaire policies, but he's not doing that right now. So you need to, and he's on Fox News, and he is basically saying we got to get off this billionaire giveaway, Republicans, and do something else. And that's a guy who's worked very closely with the establishment of the Republican Party. There are other Bill Kristols out there. I mean, one of the things you can do with the power and the list that Obama has, he hasn't done yet, maybe he will, is try to drive those activists towards targeted campaigns against groups, companies, even pundits and other sort of establishment figures, and try to build a new coalition. You have to create some space there, but I am not of the opinion that every Republican wants to go off the political cliff.
Lee, let me give you the last question here. The other obviously big issue with Grover Norquist is he's not elected. No one voted for him. Why do we keep asking him what he will accept in these fiscal cliff debates?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I think in addition to the pledge, one of the great Norquist tricks is a mass amnesia spell over Washington. People have forgotten that, as you mentioned, he laundered money for Jack Abramoff. He helped Tom DeLay with the K Street project. He was a registered lobbyist for Fannie Mae, and there's a clear paper trail that shows that he was a tobacco industry hack throughout the 90s. But folks have forgotten that, and they take him pretty seriously.
Yeah, well, we actually used a stuffed Grover doll on this set at one point. We're trying to take him as not seriously as possible. But I appreciate so much, Lee, the work that you have done to help us see sort of what Grover Norquist really is. So thank you to Lee Fong in San Francisco. Also, thank you to Dan Dicker here at the table in Nerdland. And the rest are back for more. Up next.